Welcome to the Game of Life podcast, where we bring you inspiring softball stories, insightful tips from coaches and players, and explore how the game transcends its boundaries to become a metaphor for life. Whether you're a sports enthusiast, a casual fan, or someone just looking for inspiration, you're in for a treat. We'll unravel the tales that go beyond the scoreboard. Discover how perseverance and hard work on the field translates into resilience in your daily challenges. Learn about teamwork, leadership, and the unwavering spirit that fuels success, not just in sports, but in the game of life. Hey, we're back.
Yep.
Yeah, excited. You'll be back in New York later in the week, so that'll be fun.
No, first time in a few months. I'm excited.
Maybe we'll have to do a live podcast together.
Woohoo! I love it.
Decisions. But anyways, we got talking that, obviously avid listeners understand your past a little bit and your history and what you stand for. But let's try to just tell your story tonight about how Alli Richmond came to be Alli Richmond. So
All right.
I'll stop. I'll be looking down and taking some notes and asking questions, but go ahead and
Yeah.
start where you want to start.
Yeah. Okay. So if everyone could get comfy for the next 6 hours, I'm just kidding. Yeah. So I guess I'll start back when I kind of, got into athletics. So I think growing up, I obviously have an older sister who's a year and a half older than me. So naturally, as a younger sister, you kind of just get into everything that they get into, right? So my sister was about 8 or 9, and she started playing softball. Growing up before that, we both played soccer, did gymnastics for a little bit, which was fun. But once she picked up a softball, I had to do the same thing. So we got into t-ball and things like that. And I vividly remember when she was, I think 9, a local travel team reached out to her and was like, "Hey, we want you to come try out for our local travel team." And my eyes lit up. I'm
She
like,
was 8, so
oh, she was 8.
but
Okay.
that doesn't matter. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Okay. I just remember I was 7 at the time. So my eyes lit up. I'm like, this is awesome. I was always the little sister going to practice. So she went to that tryout and I was just kind of there. They let me practice with them and they kind of said, hey, we want Jenna on the team. Alli can come too, basically. So is how I remember it. So I was a little 7-year-old girl signed up to play travel softball and it changed my life, obviously. But I think at that point, I just think back to how much fun I thought it was. I was literally so intrigued just by the sport in general or any sport in general. And that was kind of the starting point for me of getting into athletics. At the same time, when I was young, and I don't think a lot of people know this about me, I actually did karate too. So I wanted to do something that my sister didn't do, being the younger sibling. So I got into karate, and that was really interesting as a 6, 7-year-old girl, meditating, doing nunchuck routines, sparring with 40-year-old men, breaking wood, things like that. So I think back to this day, like that was a super unique experience that I had. I went all the way up through to get my black belt. And that was just a really cool experience too. So from a young age, I, give my parents a lot of credit for getting me into different sports. And I think it allowed me to really choose the ones that I liked. So let's go through the softball journey a little bit. So I joined that travel team. I think that I got 1 hit the entire summer. Is that right? You can stat check me on
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was your last. Now, again, travel softball. You played only 4 or 5 tournaments, and they were all within a couple hours of home. But it was the last tournament where you got a hit.
Yeah. And I actually do remember that. It felt great. I think, starting early on in my career, I played up with older girls and that kind of became a hallmark for me as I moved through my career. And I think that was something that I can give a lot of credit to for the reason I ended up where I did. And the other thing I take away from, playing at a young age was I just loved it. And I think that carried all the way through my college career. Like I was just happy to be there. And I think sometimes that's something that can be missing. I just went to the field every day and I had so much fun and I loved it. And that was something through my career that I really tried to emulate. And I wanted to make sure that I never lost that feeling. So kept playing travel softball for a few years. We ended up going to a different local travel team. So played there for a few more years, really decided I love the sport even more. And then once we got to about I'm not good with ages here. It's kind of all blurred to me when I look back, but I want to say maybe seventh grade. My sister and I had gotten really serious about it, and we were like, all right, maybe, this is something we want to do really competitively, maybe even at the college level. So we made a really, really tough decision to move away from the local travel team and the girls that we've been playing with for 3, 4 years, and go to a more regional team that was based an hour away, up in Binghamton, New York. So that move was a scary time for our family just because we were really committed people, right? We had played with this team for a long time. We enjoyed the girls, we enjoyed the family, but ultimately we sat down together and said, hey, like, what do you guys want out of this, right? What is your goal here? And ultimately we decided to make that jump. So from that point, we moved to a travel team out of Binghamton, played for a 14-year organization there for Rich Wiggins was his name. He was my favorite travel coaches of all time. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago, but I can't thank him enough for everything he did. We had the best program, the best team. I still talk to some of the girls on that team. When you talk about team camaraderie and things like that, I think back to that team all the time. He was just someone right away who looked at me and said, you're going to go places if you want to. Like, I believe in you. And for me, who was always younger, playing up on teams, like that meant the world to me, whether he knew it or not. He's like, I see something in you and you're going to see it in yourself and I'm going to make you. So I think that was kind of one of those times where I'm just like, damn, okay, like I think I have what it takes here. And I really appreciated that. And we did great things on that team. Through that point, we kind of started to move up through high school. And I want to talk about my high school journey for a second too, and then I'll turn it over to you, Dad, because I know I'm rambling here, but
You're
it's
fine. You're
quite the
fine.
story. So, I was in seventh grade, and I had always played upright. So in New York, how it works is when you're in seventh grade, you can try out for junior varsity or varsity. You can try out for whatever level you want at your high school. That's how it works in New York. I know it's different in some states. So I felt really confident as a seventh grader. I'm like, I'm going to try out for junior varsity, which is technically the ninth and 10th grade team. And I remember after tryouts, I went into the coach's office and they said, hey, you're cut. Like, you didn't make it. You're the last person. Like, you were next up to make this team, but you got cut. And I will never forget in that moment how embarrassed I felt, how humiliated I felt, how upset I was. And I just remember going home and looking at you, and you said, well, you got two choices. You can piss and moan about it and not play this year unmodified, or you can work your butt off this year, excuse me, and and you can prove them wrong next year. And that was kind of the first time in my softball career, since I was always playing up, that I got that sort of rejection in some way. And I think back to it this day, and I'm grateful that it happened, because the next year when I tried out for JV, I ranked first in the entire tryout. And I can't sit here and say that that would or wouldn't have happened, but because it did, that lit a fire in me that I don't think ever went out all the way through college. So made junior varsity my eighth grade year, played JV eighth, ninth grade. At the same time, we transitioned to the final travel team that we finished out on. So that was the TC Tremors organization. Again, really grateful for that experience. Made a lot of amazing friends there who then became family. And ended up playing varsity in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So I'll turn it over to you there.
Couple funny things when you're on varsity in 10th grade, you weren't going to start, and second baseman was sick, and you got in the game and started every game after that. So
Yeah.
There's a whole lesson in that you have to be ready for an opportunity when you get it,
Yeah. And I think another thing I learned too is when I made it up to varsity, I was a catcher on JV. Like, I was a catcher. That's what I did. Most people on my college team don't even know that I was ever a catcher. And I'm going to get to that point in a minute. So my entire life, I'd call all the way up through ninth grade. And I got up to varsity, and my coach looked at me and was like, well, we have a catcher. So if you want to be on the field, I need you somewhere else. And I let myself be upset over that for a day, maybe. And then I said, okay, well, I want to be on the field. So I'm going to make it work, because we need a second baseman, we need a third baseman, we need anything else. And I decided that I'd rather be on the field than not at all. And I think, yeah, go ahead. You had a
Now,
thought?
well, a couple things there. When I wrote a couple notes when you talked about Mr. Wiggins, because
Yeah.
obviously when you play travel ball, you caught, but there were games you didn't catch because it's an
Hmm.
elite travel organization. There's other people that do that with you. And it wasn't the same as being on your school team where you're supposed to be the catcher.
Right.
And you and your older sister always handled it well because to this day, I cannot stand, literally my blood boils when someone tells me not that they play softball, but they tell me what position they play. Like
Hmm.
it's their right. Like they're the only one at that school or that travel team that plays that position.
Yeah.
No, everybody might want to play that position. You're going to play where it fits the team.
Hmm. Exactly.
And and maybe half if a large percent of players never get over that and they
Yeah.
never reach their potential. I mean, I'd have no way to put a tangible number on it, but the point
Right.
is, you can see the resentment almost the rest of their careers sometimes that they don't play their position.
Yeah.
And I don't understand it because it's not yours.
No, and I feel like you have to think like a coach, right? If there's two girls and one of them can only catch and one of them can catch and play second base and they're both two of your best hitters on the team, it's not rocket science what to do. Right?
Right.
Like you put the girl that can catching, and because the other one can play another position, you put him at second base. And to me, that's making your team better because now you have two awesome bats in your lineup just because you were versatile. So I think you got to try to see it like that instead of no, that's my position. And then we play out of spite, then we play jealous, then we play envious. And I think you truly just have to figure out where your team needs you to be and make it work. And the sooner you can figure that out, the better. Because we'll get into college later, but like a lot of people, the position they play in high school is not what they play in college or not even what they got recruited for.
Right.
So I think that's interesting too.
Well, and let's go back to the beginning when you were invited to be on the team because they wanted your older sister,
Mhm.
and they were nice. It wasn't like hiding that fact or anything, but you started playing a sport where there were no expectations. And I think that's super important for any kid in any sport. The last thing your mom and I thought we'd ever do is spend money on sports in the summertime. Like it's the
Right.
most ridiculous thing ever.
Yeah.
But when you fall in love with the process, when you get comfortable, when you're doing it for the right reasons and you're comfortable in the uncomfortable,
Hmm.
and you might get cut like you did in seventh grade or demoted to modified, whatever you want
Hmm.
to call it. Uh, when you just love everything about the lessons being taught, like your
Yeah.
mother and I enjoyed, then there's not enough money in the world to promote that. But when
Hmm.
you're doing it chasing a trophy or a championship or thinking it's
Yeah.
just your right to be on one of the so many college teams in the country, I think, like Grace said last week, comparison becomes a thief of joy. But when
Yeah.
you're doing it for your right reasons, we look back at every level and there are a lot of fun times, a lot of bad times,
Hmm.
but that's the whole point. It's
Yeah.
it's it's real life. But,
Yeah.
I always say in golf and in sports, you'll find someone in life that can love you, okay? But in sports, it's not always going to show you the love because it's not even a real thing. You have to love that
Yeah.
sport 1,000 times more than that sport's ever going to love you back. It's
100%.
it's just the way it goes, and you have to enjoy that and embrace it. And I think you always did.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And another thing I want to touch on that we didn't talk about that was a big part of my high school career and growing up was I also played basketball really competitively. And I don't think some people know that, but growing up, I always played basketball. My mom grew up playing basketball, so that was kind of something we bonded over too. And my sister played, and we were always shooting baskets in the driveway as a kid. And that was another sport I really loved. And the thing I think I love about basketball is if you make a mistake, you can make up for it in 5 seconds, right? If you get someone steals the ball from you, you go down and block them at the other end. I always say softball, if I strike out, I gotta wait 30 minutes to make up for it, to make up for it again. So I loved basketball growing up. And I, played for my high school team. I made JV in seventh grade on basketball. I played all the way through for 6 years. I was a point guard and I was an all-state honorable mention in basketball. So I love that sport. I actually played travel for a while in high school. I played travel basketball and I seriously considered playing basketball in college too. So I think for kids out there, my message on this is the ones who say, I'm going to quit this sport because I need to focus heavily on the other one. To me, like, I think they both made me better at the other one, respectively. So we had a pretty rigorous basketball schedule. We would watch film, we'd condition. It was pretty competitive. And in high school, I'd get out of my 5 month long basketball season and we'd go into what we call Hell Week for softball season in high school. And that was just like basketball practice. Like I didn't feel like I needed to practice my conditioning or anything like that because I was in the best shape I was going to be in all year after basketball season. And to me, those 5 months weren't conditioning for softball. That was just playing basketball and doing something I love. And I think that's when burnout can happen is, okay, I need to go see my strength coach 3 times a week and I need to go, do all these softball activities 5 times a week in the off season when really I'm accomplishing not the same, right? But moving different body parts, exercising my mind, learning how to be a team player, learning how to compete when playing that other sport. And that was something that was super special to me growing up too.
Well, a couple things. We always joked as a family, if there was traveling horseshoes and you wanted to play, we'd
Yeah.
probably do it because you and Jenna just love to compete.
Yeah.
And that gets lost in the whole process of getting better, specializing, getting recruited. If
Mhm.
you're gonna play after high school, knowing how to compete is probably more important than any strength coach you can have
Yeah.
or any extra hitting lesson. Like you'll find time to do that, but
Yeah.
you're really not behind as much as people say you're behind.
No.
It's sometimes it's selfishness out of the coach from that sport. Uh, Sometimes it's you really don't like to compete and you're just
Yeah.
comfortable in the good sport that you play. But if
Yeah.
you really love every aspect about competition, then it's a no-brainer to play more than one sport. Or if it's not a competitive sport, to at least do something else. It doesn't have to be a
Yeah.
competitive team sport.
And I think it's interesting because when I think back about growing up, and I think times maybe are just a little different now, but like I didn't go to 4 different instructors. Like I didn't have a hitting coach, I didn't have a fielding coach. I just had my softball coach and I had my dad helping me figure it out. And I don't necessarily think that's good or bad, but I just think it's interesting because I feel like it taught me how to understand the process of, okay, I'm struggling. How do I fix this? It taught me how to communicate with you, with my coaches of, okay, what am I doing wrong? And I feel like it just fueled the fire in me of like, I need to figure this out on my own, or I need to, go to someone who's going to help me figure this out. So I think that's interesting too, of if you just put your head down and compete, there's a lot that you can figure out on your own too.
Yeah. And if every time you're struggling, you feel you have to turn to a coach, I think you're selling yourself short and not thinking through it and not competing because you've gone to coaching. Like, what 4 things are they going to tell you, or what process can you not work on that you've been taught? Like,
Yeah.
at what point, how much is left to know from a coach? Now, it's good to have reminders. It's good to have maintenance. But if
Yeah.
you're not doing it every day of the week yourself, with or without a coach, I mean, that there's a problem as you move up in any level of competition.
Yeah, and that being said, like if you find someone you bond with who's helping you, like I'm a hitting coach and I have great connections with girls. Like there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good
Right.
thing. But to your point, it's are you hitting between the weeks you see me? If you don't see me for 2 weeks, what are you doing on your own? Right. Because I tell the girls that I give lessons to, like, I am sharpening your toolkit. You've got to use the tools. I can't use them for you.
Yes.
Right. And I can't give you a new tool every week. Like we gotta do one at a time. You gotta sharpen it, come back. Then we're ready for the next one. So I'm just helping you get prepared. And I think, girls got to keep that in mind too. To get better at something, you got to put work in on your own day in and day out. And I really feel like that's what we did growing up. And kudos to you and my sister of, it's a Saturday. Hey, let's go to the field and hit. Even during basketball season, let's take some swings in the net. It was just consistency all the time. And that just, some part of you's got to have that intrinsic motivation of, I want this. I want to get better. And I think when you think about having a purpose, that changed throughout the years, right? At the beginning, it was, I want this because it's fun, right? Then it was, I want this because I want to make varsity. Then it was, I want this because I want to do well for my team. And then it was, I want this because I want to get recruited, right? So it's just a different sort of purpose, I guess. But beneath all that, you have to love it or it's going to fizzle out.
And I think it's okay to understand fun doesn't mean there's never bad times. That
Mm-hmm.
technically that makes the fun, that those ups and downs make the fun more worth it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you always had fun, especially looking back at it now. But you have to keep everything in perspective throughout your anybody's journey. And
Yeah.
uh I don't know many times you had any expectations except help your team and try to win championships.
Yeah.
And let's face it, those can be very difficult or most often don't come true because there's so many things out of your control, like other teams,
Mm-hmm.
teammates. But that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Instead of saying I need to bat 380 and I want to hit six doubles this year and I want to play
Yeah.
second base.
Well, and I think that kind of goes into my recruiting story, which I want to get into too. Of I just love the game, and this is why I made the decision I did. And I guess I'll get into that. So growing up, I was always a consistent player, right? I was never hit 3 home runs a weekend, runs a 2-6 down first base. I was a consistent singles hitter. I was a leader on the field. I was vocal, and I was consistent defense, right? Like I don't consider myself to be a flashy player. So I had nerves of, how am I going to get recruited without a coach watching me for a decent period of time, right? Because if they watch me once, I'm not going to hit a home run necessarily when they're here, maybe, right? But I'm going to hit 350 for the weekend. And that was something that I was confident in. So I knew deep down, whatever team decided to take a chance on me, I genuinely felt like I was going to make an impact there. And that's what kept me going. So my recruiting story, I knew I wanted to play softball in college. I knew I wanted to play a sport in college, probably in like seventh or eighth grade, whether that was basketball or softball. I decided on softball, I would say between ninth and 10th grade, that was really what I wanted to pursue. Frankly, I just knew I could play softball at a higher level. And that's something I really wanted for myself. No matter what sport I was, I wanted to compete at the highest level possible. And I knew softball was going to take me there. And I just fell in love with it from an early age. And that just kept going all the way through. So I started emailing schools probably freshman year. I was lucky enough to be on a travel team where every girl on my team was trying to get recruited, and we can go down the list of where everybody on that team ended
And
up
they did.
going.
Yeah,
But
they
it's
did.
crazy, yeah. So surrounding myself with people like that definitely helped. But I I guess growing up, I never really had a dream school, right? I was very logical. What do I want to do with my career? Where do I want to be geographically? And anyone who knows me knows that's true. I'm a very detailed plan person. So I started reaching out to schools at all levels, D1, D2, D3. We'd go to showcases almost every weekend. I had some contact with coaches. I won't say like exactly what schools and whatnot, but basically what had happened is I ended up going to Binghamton University, but it was an interesting story because my sophomore year, I was in contact, or no, my junior year, excuse me. I was in contact with them and they were honest with me and said, hey, you know what? Like, we have a few people ahead of you that we're looking at right now. So at this time, like, we can't, you know, offer you anything. Like, we can't give you an opportunity. And looking back, I was crushed, but I was like, you know what? I respect the crap out of them for being honest with me enough to say that and being truthful about where they're at. So at that point, I kept going. I was in contact with other schools. And a few months later, Binghamton reached out to me again and said, hey, you know what? We want you to come for a visit. Like we saw you play the other weekend and we want you to come for a visit. So the story in that to me is don't burn bridges, first of all, right? But also pay attention to how they communicate with you because to me, they were honest with me, things changed. Then they reached out and it all worked out how it's supposed to. So I went on a visit to that school, D1 mid major in New York, upstate New York. For anyone that doesn't know, it's about an hour away from where I grew up. Had the major I wanted, had amazing facilities. I loved the school. I loved the softball program. So everything about this was what I wanted. So I go on the tour that day. I'm sitting in the coach's office, and I'll never forget this conversation I had next. And they said, okay, we want to offer you a position on our team as a walk on. So as a preferred walk on. So what that means is you're not going to get any scholarship money. You may not travel with the team, probably not going to see a lot of playing time, but we want you on our team. And I remember in that moment, I didn't really know how to feel, right? Because they had just said the words to me that I always wanted to hear. Like a D1 school wants me on their team. It wasn't like I thought it was going to be, but I got what I wanted. And the two questions I asked them were, will people be able to tell I'm a walk-on by the way I'm treated? And number two, will I have the same opportunity to compete as everybody else? Those were the only two things I could think of in that moment that were important to me because all I wanted was the opportunity to compete. And I think the thing that helped me with that was being cut from JV, always playing up on older teams. I felt that if I could just get the opportunity to be there, because that was my dream, I wanted to play at the highest level and I knew I was going to love it every day. That was all I wanted. Like, that was truthfully all I wanted. And I knew deep down this was the right fit for me. And they said, people won't be able to tell. You'll be treated the same way as everybody else, and you'll have the opportunity to compete. So obviously, I took a few days, but I ended up committing to Binghamton, and it was the best decision I ever made. I guess I'll stop there and we can chat about it, and then I'll go into kind of what that looked like. But
No, so I want to talk about that because I think so many people, they want to keep playing. They want to think they know how their journey's going to end. They want it to be a Cinderella story without putting in the ups and downs of the story.
right.
But what's wrong with just being guaranteed a chance to compete?
Yeah.
And so, and if you kept saying a couple common things, you weren't like when we go down to Florida or when we're in Boulder and or Huntington Beach and when you're traveling and there's hundreds of girls around, Alli Richmond's not going to stand out on probably any one given game. Like a coach would actually have to know you. And I think college coaches have a hard situation because they want to find the next wow factor and impact player. And they can't really afford to take a chance on project players or players that are going to get better from freshman year to senior year, right? Some do, some look out for it. That's when situations like this evolve. But if you really want to play at a set level, whatever that is when you're in high school, realize there's no direct route to get there. You could go junior college for a year. You could take a year off. You could go to prep school. You could, I guess, transfer that for the right reasons. That's a whole nother, episode. But you walked in there with, again, just like when you were 7 years old with no expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's crazy. And I think the thing is too, though, like I knew that was the right decision for me. A lot of people would not, that wouldn't be a good choice for them because not that I'm ever okay with sitting the bench, but I wanted the opportunity to compete. I was okay with not walking in right away, being the best player on the team and starting on the field. I was willing to take that chance and compete. And for some people, they say, hey, I want to start right away. That's okay. Like there's no wrong answer, but you have to be honest with yourself about what you want because I remember I had a ton of people say to me things like hurtful things. Why would you travel for the past few years? You only went to a school an hour away. Um, Things like, oh, you're okay with sitting the bench. Like, who would go to a school where you sit the bench? Don't you want to start right away? And people just truly didn't understand that I loved the process so much that I knew this was the right fit for me. And I think people who say those things don't really think about it and don't think about, hey, this has been my dream for the past 3 years and I just achieved it. So I'm not sure why you're crapping all over it. But
I think they say it out of their perspective is what they don't mean anything by it. They're saying it and they're basically just telling you out loud their thoughts.
Yes, definitely. So I guess jumping into when I got to Binghamton. So I obviously got there my freshman year. I was pretty much a bench player that first year. So I caught a lot of bullpens. I got a heck of a lot better. I ended up I think I started 4 games that year. But I was having so much fun. Like that's all I remember. I remember making meaningful friendships. I remember being pushed physically more than I ever have in my life. I remember loving the college experience. I remember being grateful that I was playing D1 softball. And I remember having fun. Like that's what I remember from my freshman year. And I think the crazy thing is, even when I came home for the summer, like you saw me, I loved getting up at 6 a.m. and going to the gym. And I didn't hate it. I loved it. And people would say, why are you going to bed so early on a Saturday? Like it's 10:30. Well, I want to go to the gym at 6 a.m. And it was never something I had to do. It was genuinely just something inside me of I want to do this. I love it. I don't know what people don't understand about that. And I think it's hard for some people with an outside perspective to understand. But like when I was in that weight room at school and I was with my team, like that was my happy place. And I loved it. So go fast forward to my sophomore year. one of the things that stuck out to me was I started 4 games my freshman year, and in the fall, my team and coaches voted me as one of our team captains as a sophomore non-starter. And I will never forget sitting in that conference room and my name being called and trying to keep a straight face because I'm like, what is going on? And I just had people come up to me after, like, I'm so happy for you. I wanted this to happen. And the reason they said they did it is because they were amazed by the way that I handled myself given the role that I had. They were like, we truly admire the way that you just go about practice every day and you show up and you are contagious in the way that you make people feel and things like that. And to me, I did not realize the magnitude that that had on other people, right? Because my freshman year, like I was doing that for me because I wanted to and I loved it. But to hear the impact that it was having on other people truly changed the trajectory of my next few years because I took on that role of, okay, I'm going to be that person for the next 4 years and run with it.
Now, that how difficult was that? Because I know most people think you have to be the star player to be a captain and a leader, and that's not how it works at more advanced levels.
No.
You had a lot of characteristics and things to offer that maybe one of the starters couldn't offer necessarily. But how
Yeah.
how hard was that to voice your to lead, not voice an opinion, but to
I
lead?
honestly think, and for anyone out there who's maybe not a starter right now, if you look at it the right way, you can learn a lot by being on the sidelines and you can read a lot. So the thing I tried to do, and I am a huge advocate of this in terms of being a leader, is you have to have meaningful relationships. So instead of, to me, being a leader is not everybody get in here and screaming at them individually. It's okay. Uh, Somebody, right? Let's call them Sarah, somebody, I don't know, whoever, showed up to practice today and she just looks off and she's having a rough day. And we come in for water and I pull her over and I'm like, hey, everything okay? Like, and we're talking, hey, you got this. I just want you to know people look to you. You're doing a great job. Keep your head up. Like those small interactions, 5 a week, add up over time. And to me, that's what being a leader is making sure you're connected with individual people so that when those times come, and you're in the bottom of the seventh inning and you're on the bench and you go up to them again and you're like, hey, remember what I told you at practice? And it's just, it's those connections that are like sparks in the air that just make a team flow together. And I think the more that people have those, the better your team's going to be. And that's what I felt like I did my freshman year. So then everybody had a relationship, or I had a relationship with everybody.
You made a great point. Success in life is about, I mean, those relationships,
Mhm.
but success in pressure filled or stressful moments comes from being able to use those relationships as reference points, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And strengths and having those little conversations. You just put it away for when maybe you need it later. It's not giving the big speech at the end of the game, or it's not getting on somebody that made a mistake. They already feel bad enough,
Yeah.
right? You don't need to point it out. So
And
no.
I think it just goes back to loving it too. Like anytime we had an optional practice, I was there my freshman year. Anytime we had an optional workout, I was there. Allie, you want to go to the field and hit balls? Yep. Want to go to the cages? Yep. And I think people sometimes think, well, I think people get the mindset of, oh, I'm not playing anyway. What's the point? Where I was just, okay, well, maybe this isn't for me to play, but I'm going to make you better. So that was kind of my goal, is how hard can I push the girl in front of me because now we're all going to be better.
And if practice is still playing, like you're still competing.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're not in the box score or you're not getting your name announced, but you're still on a field where so many people didn't get that opportunity, wish they had it.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's so easy to feel sorry for yourself. And I'm sure you had moments like that. Was there ever a moment where you're like, why am I doing this?
So we'll get there. So fast forward to my sophomore year. Yeah, I think this was my sophomore year. After my freshman year, I was like, you know what? I am gonna work my butt off. I'm gonna make it back. We're gonna do awesome stuff. Or I'm trying to think, what year was COVID year? Was that my junior year?
That was your junior year.
Okay, okay. So I worked my butt off. Sophomore year, nothing went crazy different. I think I got a few more starts, a few more at bats, but I genuinely felt like I was getting better. And I remember calling you after my sophomore year. I remember this phone call to this day. And I was like, Dad, you know what? Like, I don't know if I'm ever gonna be a role player here on the field, but I feel like I'm making an impact and I'm proud of that. And we had like an hour long conversation about it. And I was like, I really just want to do well for my team and I want to get out there. But I am starting to think I don't know if that's going to happen because I'm giving this everything that I have. And we just had the talk of you're doing everything you can and all you can do is add value in whatever opportunity that you're given, whether that's in the dugout, in the bullpen. Like we started to joke that I was our fourth string catcher because I caught so many bullpens and I knew the pitchers. Like I had hand signals with all the pitchers what pitches they were throwing next. I was blocking balls. I would catch live in practice. So we started joking around that I was a fourth string catcher too. But I just think
From
after
a
that,
from a
yeah,
parent's point of view, I got to see you more than when you were in the dugout, though.
true.
I could
Yeah.
look over in the bullpen and
Yeah.
seriously
Um,
though.
but like I never necessarily felt sorry for myself, I guess, because I never had anything promised to me. It wasn't like the game owed me nothing, right? It was just, what am I going to do about this? Like, what do I want to happen and what am I going to do about it? So, had that conversation sophomore year, worked my butt off. Then junior year came around, and the first practice of our fall season, I dove for a ball, landed on my shoulder, and sprained my AC joint in my shoulder. So I couldn't lift my arm. So the entire pretty much fall season that my team was competing, and I had just worked my butt off in the gym that summer, probably getting the strongest that I ever had. I couldn't lift or do anything for 6 weeks. And that was hard. And I know anyone who's had an injury sees that, but just seeing everyone else progress without you, it seems like, and then jumping back in 6 weeks later, like, all right, I'm back, except I'm not where I was 6 weeks ago. So that was hard to kind of feel like, okay, I just did this all over the summer and then it went away. But again, that's adversity. That's life. No one's gonna feel sorry for me. I can't choose that happened, but I can choose how I respond. So I decided to do what I could, cheer on my teammates, lift them up as much as I could during those 6 weeks. And then winter came, got strong again, and then that spring COVID happened. So that was a little damper in things, but I guess I'll stop there before we get into my senior year.
No, but I don't know if I should say it on air, but do you remember your stats your COVID year? Because it was a shortened schedule.
Let's just say, I mean, they were not good. I think I had like one hit and 15 at bats or something like
Yeah,
that. So I
yeah.
definitely did not start out hot my junior year.
No,
Um,
no. And abbreviated season and a lot going on and
mm,
not even knowing if you're gonna play games. But uh yeah, so then that's it, right? But one I'm joking. One thing I've always told you that it's just I always say it's the way it happens to you, but I think it's the way it happens to you because it's the way you always embrace it. Your best moments often come from your worst moments.
mhm.
And nobody wants it to be that way. But I
Yeah.
think the reason a lot of people can't say that is because after the worst moments, they don't carry on.
Yeah. To answer your other question, I never once felt like, why am I doing this? I never felt like that because I just loved working my butt off towards something because honestly, now that I'm graduated, there's really never another time in your life where you're working with 20 people who are just as motivated as you, doing the same thing as you, all working toward a common goal. Like that is super rare. Um, so I never once regretted it, no matter what. So I just want to put that out there too. I was always happy with it. Okay, so going into senior year, we so where things took a little bit of a turn. So I went in my senior year and my head coach had stepped down. My assistant coach had stepped up into the head coach role, and we got a new assistant coach, a new hitting coach. And she came in and pretty much rocked my world, to be honest. So she came in, and I remember the first practice with her, I was swinging. She came up to me like really close, and she goes, "You need to stop trying so hard." She's like, "You're a perfectionist, aren't you?" I go, "Yeah." And she said, "Okay, we're gonna fix that." And at that moment, I didn't really know what she meant, but I had a lot of conversations with her. So her and I were pretty similar mindset wise in terms of I need to understand what you're doing so that I can understand how it's going to make me better. We're very analytical. You need to show me, you need to do it with me, and then set me free and let me do it on my own. So she kind of came in and introduced a new way of hitting that had to do with getting your barrel deep and whipping through the zone. So it was a lot more free flow for all those hitters out there instead of that tense, like knob to the ball sort of action that I was pretty much always saw growing up. And I had a tough conversation with my head coach of like, Al, listen, you're good, but if you want to be great, we got to switch something up. So I really want you to commit to this and I want you to try it. And I remember being in her office when she said that, and I'm like, you know what? I'm in, let's do it. So over the next few months, I worked with her and my head coach like crazy. I was hitting all the time. I was committed to it. I was asking her questions. We'd have side conversations. We'd watch videos, stuff like that, of just how I was gonna get this swing to work for me. And I remember through the fall, I did okay. And one thing I always say to people is when you're changing something with your swing, and this goes for life too, you got to fail through it, right? You're not going to get instant gratification. And sometimes you have two options when you're failing through something. You can struggle with it and revert back to what you're doing, or you can struggle through it knowing that there's going to be a lift or a rise up at the end where you're going to get to where you want to be. So one of the core memories I have in my head is that our last fall game of my senior year, I was starting. We were playing at Lehigh, and I just remember a pitch came in and I hit a gap double. And it was special to me because I knew that I swung the way that we'd been training. I could feel it. I knew it was happening. So that game, I hit two doubles. I made like two diving plays at shortstop, and I was like, "Holy crap, it's happening!" And then we didn't play again for 4 months because that was our last game of the fall season. So I'm like, great, got it, gotta save it. So it worked out in all winter, but in the spring, we played over 50 games that year. I started every single one and ended up being first team all conference. So I, there's just a lot to unpack there. I think again, like it's easy telling a story and saying, "Oh, I trusted the process," but it was messy. I got frustrated. It was really tough. But I think for all the athletes out there, especially as we're going into the winter right now, and I told the girls I'm hitting that I hit with this, when you're playing live in games during season, you're putting band-aids all over your swing, right? Temporary fixes. This is surgery time. Like winter is surgery. Like we gotta fix whatever's happening right now. So they come in and I ask the girls I coach, what needs surgery? Like what do we need to work on? If you're a great hitter right now, what's gonna make you or if you're a good hitter right now, what's gonna make you a great one? And I think the first part of it is truly understanding how it's going to make you better because she was the first, well, we had a good relationship where she would say something and I'd be like, I don't get it. I don't understand what you're saying. And I think a lot of girls are afraid to ask that and just be like, yep, got it. And then they keep doing the same thing. But I think it's important for you to have dialogue of, can you show me again? I literally have no idea what you're saying. So,
No, I ask girls that all the time. If I don't mind who you work with or what you're working on or who you play travel for, or maybe you just hit on your own in the wintertime. But when you come into an open gym or practice and I ask what you're working on and you don't know, then I don't even know what the point of it all is.
yeah. Yeah.
Or you can't, when you say you're struggling, I'm like, well, what's it feel like? And you can't answer that question. Then what's the point of it all?
Yeah.
And so many people don't. Maybe it's the environment. Maybe it's they don't care. Maybe they don't know because no one's had these conversations. But
Right.
more of the reason, every player out there, I mean, I think I'm pleading with them. Find out why you're doing it and what you're doing. So,
Yeah. And
all right, go
I
ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think it's easy to fix the thing, or it's easy to practice and fun to practice the things you're really good at. No one wants to practice the things you're not good at, but that's what needs the most practice. So I think it's ironic.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So that was it. You graduated. It was your senior year.
no, not quite. Um, so we haven't talked about academics much too, but in college I was a double major in financial economics and actuarial science. So people don't know what actuarial science is. It's basically applied statistics. So it's a math major. I'm a little bit nerdy, for those that know me, and now those of you that don't know me know that. But I actually ended up, because I had my COVID year, doing a 4+1 Master's of Business Administration MBA program. So I played my fifth year also. We can rush. I got first team all conference again that year. So I remember calling you at the end of that year, and we referred back to that time I called you my sophomore year, saying, you know what, like it's okay. I just love this. But I think one of the big things that stands out to me is my fifth year. Every year at Binghamton, there's a celebrating women in athletics luncheon, and it's basically a huge fundraiser to give girls scholarship money that play at Binghamton. And every year they have a keynote speaker and a student speaker. And they asked me to be the student speaker my fifth year in front of 600 people. And I remember getting the email and I was like, hey, what do you want me to talk about? And they were like, we just want you to tell your story of coming to Binghamton and what it's been like. And that was probably the most humbling thing for me throughout my entire career, because
Right.
it was, I never came into Binghamton, I want to be first team all conference and I want to be a keynote. I want to be a speaker in front of 600 people. That wasn't my goal. It was, I want to commit to the process. I want to get better. I want to make meaningful friendships here. And I want to come out of this university better than I was. So to hear someone say, I think your story is worth being heard, was the best gift I could have received coming out of college.
Yeah, it was you, and the keynote was Daddy Pepper.
Yeah, Dottie Pepper. So it was crazy. And I think another thing to point out too is, so I ended up getting put on scholarship while I was at Binghamton, but it wasn't my senior year, it was my junior year. Or it was before my senior year,
Right,
excuse me.
right.
So that was before any of those accolades I ever had on the softball field, which again, I feel like is a testament to just working hard, putting your head down, and loving what you do. So,
I'm speechless.
yeah, for once. Yeah.
No, it's fun looking back because, even from a parent standpoint, not a coaching standpoint, no parent likes to watch a child struggle.
Mhm.
But I mean, you either find the joy in it somehow, because happiness is almost like a state of being. It's not a destination. And when you find the reasons you like doing something, then even the struggle is not that bad because you can get through it. I don't know if you remember what I always used to always tell you too is you've survived every worst day of your life.
Yeah, 100%.
So
But
build
I,
on that.
I think too, it's a lot to do with the people you surround yourself with, because when I was going through those struggles and I called you and mom and my sister and my friends from home, it was never, oh, you poor thing, you're not playing. It was, hey, what'd you get better at today? How was practice? How's the team looking? So what'd you guys do? It was never, do you think you're gonna start? Did you do better than her? How's the girl in front of you? Did you do better than her? That was and legitimately never the conversation we had. It was always positive of, hey, did you beat your conditioning time? What'd you lift today? Like it was so positive. And to me, like that's what helped me keep going and keep the positive attitude that I had, was having conversations with you and my family and the people around me who were my close friends that were pushing me to be better.
If you don't have the support and you're always trying to compare your success based on someone else's,
Hmm.
you're not going to ever end up where you think you should end up, wherever it is. I don't know. But
Yeah.
if you have the support, you have a good circle, friends, family that love you, and you're just trying to better yourself,
Hmm.
you still might not end up where you think you should have been, but you're going to
Yeah.
end up in a better spot. And I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and I think it's crazy because in some of those moments in high school and college, you think this wasn't how it's supposed to go. Why is this happening to me? Why is it happening to me? Right? I don't want this to happen. But now, as I've entered my post-athlete era, I like to call it, stuff happens in my life, stuff happens at work where I'm like, well, I've felt this feeling before. And I start to see why things happen the way they did. So they set me up now. And it's just crazy to see. So I challenge everybody out there, when you're going through something that sucks, you got to think, okay, how can I get through this and what's it setting me up for? And sometimes we don't get to know right away. We don't get to know at all. But I think you have to be open and have a thought process like that to find benefits and everything that you go through.
100%.
But
No, so what, what would you have done different? Anything? Or is that the whole point? You wouldn't have?
no, honestly, what would I have done different? Nothing. Probably. I think everything happened the way that it was supposed to. I think the question I like instead of what would you have done different is what perspective do you wish you had? Like obviously I wish me now could have told freshman me, keep going, you're gonna be fine. Because I think she would have liked to know that. But you don't get to know that, and that's life. So you have to make the choice. Do I want to commit to this and give it 100% or don't I? Because when I think back, I easily could have said in my sophomore year, well, this just is how it is. I'm going to coast the rest of the way. And I'm sure I would have been happy and things would have went the way they would, but I would have been set up to deal with adversity in life the way that I am now. I know that for sure. So sometimes you think, oh, what am I going to get out of this? It's not necessarily what you're going to get out of this in the next week. It's what am I going to get out of this experience in the next 5 years? What tools am I putting in my toolkit? What body armor am I, developing right now that's going to help me 5 years down the line when adversity hits and I've never had to deal with it before. So I think that's something you have to keep in mind too. Like all the life lessons that come out of this are absolutely insane.
Now, as much of a story as you had, and your athletic career is your athletic career, your academic career
Yeah.
is your academic career. You think you got a lot of stories left to play out? Like that's the whole thing. You have the tools and
Mm-hmm.
the strength to do other things in life, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's crazy about softball more than any other sport is you fail more than you succeed. But because of that, more than any other sport, you have to figure out how to pick up the pieces and pick yourself up time and time again. So that made me confident that going into life, when crap hits the fan, because it's gonna, I know how to pick myself up because I've done it so many times over and over and over again. So I don't doubt that I'm gonna fall, but I know how to pick myself up, and that didn't scare me anymore. And I think that was one of the biggest pieces taking away from my athletic career of I know I'm going to be okay no matter what happens to me because I've made it through every hard day I've had so far. And I surround myself with people who are going to help pick me up on days that I can't do it myself. So I think that's one piece. But to your point, most of the story I told today was just in college, which was 5 years. So in 5 years, all that stuff happened. I've only been I live in Illinois now. I've only been here for a year and a half. So who knows what's going to happen in the next 3 years? And I was actually joking with some friends earlier of I've been here for a year and a half and I think how different my life is from a year and a half ago. What's it going to be like a year and a half from now? Because one of my
It's
favorite things you've told me is you're always one connection away from changing your life. I could meet someone tomorrow who's gonna do crazy things in my life. And
Yep.
I like living life like that. And I think you just got to stay open to every opportunity you have.
So true. I think we'll end it with that. You have to stay open to every opportunity you
Yeah.
might have.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. I
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing your story. I mean, I lived it, but I like
Right.
reliving it.
Yeah, no, definitely happy to share.
All right. We'll see you at home this week.
All right. See ya.
Bye.